everyone, and welcome to the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. Today is our first panelist discussion on trending issues on animal welfare. I am Dr. Iyasiri Oluwashonsira. I am the coordinator of the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria, and I'll be moderating the discussion. With me,
Samuel Sharo, a lecturer in the Department of Animal Breeding and Genetics, Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Ogun State, Nigeria. I'm also a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Animal Sciences, Purdue University, West Lafayette in Indiana, USA.
So I want to welcome everybody, and I want to assure you that we are going to have a cool time today. And please, I want all the participants to please put their questions pertaining to these topics in the chat box, and we will take them accordingly with the panelists. And at the appropriate time, you'll be allowed to turn on your video and also give some comments later. So I would like Dr. Sharo to give us the mission statement for the group.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yasiri. Once again, I am Samuel Sharo, a lecturer in the Department of Animal Breeding and Genetics, Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Ogun State, Nigeria. Presently, I'm in the US as a postdoctoral fellow. I work with Dr. Erasmus Marisa in the Department of Animal Sciences, Purdue University. So I want to welcome everybody to Animal Welfare Group Nigeria, and the acronym is AWGN. So AWGN was founded in 2019 after a gathering of our students and lecturers from the College of Veterinary Medicine, Department of Animal Breeding and Genetics, Department of Animal Physiology, Department of Pastoral and Range Management, Department of Animal Production and Health, and Department of Aquaculture and Fisheries Management, all in the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Ogun State, Nigeria. And we have three missions. The first one is to increase awareness of animal behavior and welfare in Nigeria, Africa, and the world at large. So the sole aim is to increase awareness, because we have so many countries in the world that have not even heard about animal welfare before. And we have so many people around the world that don't know anything about animal behavior and welfare. The second mission is to foster collaboration and networking among researchers who are in the field of animal behavior and welfare. So we want to collaborate with people around the world. We want to collaborate with Alan that is in Hong Kong, collaborate with Kris that is in Australia, and so many other people that will be joining us. And the third mission is to educate the public on the importance of animal welfare. Like I said earlier, we have so many people that don't know anything about animal welfare. So presently, we want them to know. We want them to know what animal welfare entails. We want people to know the right of animals and the freedoms of the animal. And we meet every first and third Wednesdays of every month to discuss issues that are related to animal welfare and behavior. Over to you, Dr. Yasir.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And if today is your first time of joining the Animal Welfare Group, we want to welcome you to the group. And today we have three panelists in our midst. Unfortunately, we are not able to have Dr. Hugolich, and he sent his greetings to us. He's a bit ill, and we wish him quick recovery. So today we are having Dr. Kris Descovich and Dr. Alan McElligott and Dr. Erika Voogd, right? We want to appreciate you. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be part of us today. And we will start. Today we'll be discussing, I think, 4 main issues, 6 main issues. I hope time permits us. We'll be talking briefly about ethical issues in animal welfare research. When is it okay to euthanize animals? What do you think about the use of animals for entertainment? How can we prevent animal extinction? And what punishment should someone get for animal cruelty? I've had someone ask me that question, I couldn't answer. So Some management practices such as debeaking, castration, and tail docking will be discussed. And please, like I said earlier on, kindly drop whatever question you have on these topics in the chat box. So we'll start by taking the bio of our panelists. And I would like to take that of Dr. Alan McElligott. Dr. Alan McElligott is an associate professor in animal behavior and welfare. His affiliation is Department of Infectious Diseases and Public Health, Jockey Club College of Veterinary Medicine and Life Sciences, City University of Hong Kong. And he received his Bachelor of Science from the University College Cork, his PhD from University College Dublin, and postdoctoral training at the University of Zurich. After serving as a faculty member at the University of Nottingham, Queen Mary University of London, and the University of Roehampton, he joined City University of Hong Kong in 2020. Alan is a member of the Association for the Study of Animal Behavior, ASAP, and as well as serving as ASAP's Education and EDI committees. He is also a member of the International Society for Applied Ethology, ISAE, and serves on ISA's EDI committee. His research on the diverse array of species, such as fallow deer, cattle, goats, chickens, and kangaroos, has been featured in many news reports across TV, radio, newspapers, and other media. So you're welcome, Dr. Alan.
Thank you very much.
Bio of the others.
Thank you very much, everybody. I want to thank the panelists for joining us and the participants for creating this time to join us. I will read the bio of Kris and Erika. For Kris, Dr. Kris Descovich is an animal welfare scientist with the University of Queensland School of Veterinary Science. Our research aims to understand and improve the welfare of animals across a range of contexts, including production, bioscience, shelters, and captive wildlife facilities. She has a particular interest in animal psychological health and how behavior can be used to gain insight into the experiences of animals. Currently, she's the principal investigator for the project Elevate, a research program investigating the impact of traumatic experiences on animals, and is also the research coordinator for the Animal Welfare Standard Project, a large international collaboration between Australia and China that aims to improve livestock management and welfare in production systems. With a background in wildlife biology, Kris has worked with many incredible animals, from wombats to orangutans, and enjoys the challenge that comes with each different species and individual animal. Her work has taken her all over the world and given her the opportunity to work with many outstanding researchers in animal behavior, management, and welfare. So help me welcome Dr. Kris Descovich.
Thank you very much.
Then the bio of Erika Voogd. Erika Voogd is the president of Voogd Consulting Incorporation, West Chicago in Illinois. Erika Voogd is currently working as an independent consultant, specializing in global assistance to the meat industry. Our expertise includes animal welfare, food safety, hazard analysis, critical control points, quality assurance, sanitation, and USDA regulatory compliance. Ms. Voogd has over 35 years of experience in quality assurance, production, and sanitation for the meat industry. Since 1999, Ms. Voogd has worked closely with Dr. Temple Grandin and McDonald's during the implementation of the McDonald's system animal welfare goals in Asia, Australia, Latin America, and North America. She has assisted Dr. Grandin during training of auditors in Asia, Australia, Brazil, and North America, and has independently taught McDonald's system auditors in South America, Canada, Latin, and Central America. Our other assignments include training on behalf of the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service to prepare meat plants for export to the United States. This training involved hazard analysis critical control points, sanitation standard operating procedures, and humane handling education of inspectors. It also includes regulatory staff and plant management in Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Serbia. She recently received a master's degree in meat science and bachelor's degree in animal science from the University of Illinois. I want you to join me in welcoming Erika Voogd. Erika, you are welcome.
Okay. Nice to be here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
By discussing ethical issues in animal welfare research. I would like to ask Dr. Alan, please, can you just briefly talk about why ethical approval is important and what it is really?
Sorry, getting back to the question, why is ethical approval important?
Yeah.
A couple of reasons. I guess the main one is to guard the welfare of the animals that people might be studying. But the other thing that people tend to forget about in getting ethical approval, usually going through a proper ethical approval system, the research design and the research plans are probably looked or reviewed by 2 or 3 people. So you can actually get really useful advice about the design of the research, the sample size required for the research, the effect size that you're looking at as well. So that's a very sort of short answer, but I mean, there are many different reasons, but one is to try to protect the animals that you're studying and optimize their welfare. But the other thing actually is in terms of the research design and making sure that you've got the best quality, the best standard of whatever the experiment may be. And therefore, if you are using animals, particularly in an invasive way, that you're actually maximizing the research output from those animals so that nothing is wasted. And for example, some research may involve pain for the animals or invasive procedures. Well, if you're going to do that, you must make sure that the research design is correct, so that you're using the correct number of animals, etc., so that your results are robust.
Thank you.
So I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I was able to gather. It's also part of the welfare of the animals to make sure that whatever animal you're using, you use them to the best and don't use excessive number of animals. Yeah. And I want to ask, when does the research require an ethical approval?
Is that for me or somebody else? Or
Descovich, have you told me that?
Yeah, sure.
What's
actually,
really, yeah.
Actually, it depends from a legislation and framework point of view, it actually depends on the region that you're in. There are some things that will definitely require animal ethics approval, things that are usually invasive, anything usually more than behavioral observation. So as soon as you start even handling an animal, giving them an injection or anything like that, that will usually require animal ethics approval. But in some cases, even behavioral observations will require some ethical approval as well. It really just depends on which region you're in and what the framework is that you're working under. So yeah, it varies very much from region to region, which I think is the challenge when it comes to animal ethic approval in terms of what we might expect. This can be a challenge when you're publishing science because scientists may very well be adhering to the ethical approval framework of their region, but when they submit to a journal, they're getting reviewed by reviewers from a different region and have a different expectation of what might have required animal ethical approval. So it can actually be a bit of a barrier in terms of consistency across regions about what approval is required.
So how can this be standardized? For instance, what you may find as something highly invasive or that needs ethical approval in your country, which may not be the same in my country. How do we standardize this so that we all maybe are on the same platform? What do you think we can do about that?
I think I think there are definitely, once it becomes quite invasive, it should always have ethical approval. Unfortunately, that does mean that there are reduced opportunities for scientists working in regions that they can't get institutional or organizational ethical support for. But the impacts on animals are just too large when it comes to high impact science. I think the ways that we can work about that is a lot of organizations actually do have published guidelines on how to approach animal-based research. So some of the guidelines that people might be familiar with are the PREPARE guidelines, which actually goes through some of the things that you need to think about when designing an experiment. Once you've conducted your experiment, there's also the ARRIVE guidelines, and they're actually more about the reporting of your science to make sure that you're reporting them in a transparent way. And also some societies actually also publish ethical guidelines because researchers will be, if you're an animal behavior scientist, you might be publishing a lot in applied animal behavior science or animal behavior. Those journals actually do have some ethical guidelines and ethical frameworks which people can access. But we do need to provide, I think, opportunities for appropriate animal ethic approval around the world, because like Alan said, and this, I completely agree with this because I sit on a large animal ethics committee, is that the animal ethics framework is not just about the publication, but it's also about improving science. And the people who sit on ethics committees are highly skilled and come from very varied backgrounds. And the advice that they provide on improving your science is really, immeasurable, that you come out with a better statistical design, a better experimental design. I think it's a big challenge for, our field and for all fields that use animal welfare or animal science to make sure that those opportunities exist across the world for other people as well. And Alan, I can see in the chat, has put the links to the PREPARE guidelines for other people to access.
Thank you so much. Erika, do you want to add to this?
I'm going to make some comments about a whole. Obviously, we have two doctors from universities, so they're very familiar with the guidelines that would be required for university research. And I put in there the AWGN. Here we have in US, we have AWGN guidelines. I'm not sure if they apply to the whole world, but I also looked up the ARRIVE information and put the link for that too, about how to report. But I'm going to talk a little bit, just a little tiny bit, about something that you may not even realize. And I have a friend who is responsible for the research of pet food for cats and dogs in Ecuador. And Ecuador, this is something I did not know. Ecuador follows the same procedures that they do here in the United States. And therefore, when they make a large batch of dog or cat food, they need to feed it to the animals in the research program first to make sure that it's digestible, that it's healthy, that the animals can thrive on that before it's released to the public. This is something I did not know. And this particular friend of mine has created a very natural environment for the animals. So they obviously they need to evaluate the digestibility and keep the animals to a degree. The dogs and cats need to be separated, but they have also provided access to each other so they can view each other. The cats can view each other. The cats have outdoor access, and they have hammocks, and they have little tunnels to crawl through. And so they live like real cats, family animals. They live like family animals in the sense that they interact with people, they interact with other animals. They get to go outdoors. The dogs get to play together, and they have a play area. And then when they come back to a kennel that provides comfort, and they're able to collect, fecal samples and make sure that they're fed individually. But at the same time, they have welfare, good welfare, and it's also much more practical for understanding how this food would be utilized by your dog or cat, not one that's sitting in a crate or in a cage and has no access to the real world. So that's a different example. I learned a lot just from visiting my friend at that research facility.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think there is a question here, and the participant actually directed it to Dr. Alan. And the question is, in ensuring the welfare of the animal, in ensuring that the welfare of animal is taken into serious consideration during ethical approval, how do we balance research on animal pain?
So like Kris, I serve on an animal ethics review committee at City University of Hong Kong as well. So I do end up, in fact, I reviewed a proposal yesterday that involved pain for the animals. I myself am not involved in that sort of research, but some invasive research does involve pain to the animals. And in those situations, you carry out a sort of mental cost-benefit analysis about what are the potential benefits of the research and what are the costs. And importantly, if the research is going to be invasive and involve pain for the animals, then what are the pain mitigation strategies? Are the animals going to get pain relief after the treatments to manage that pain as well as possible? And when people actually do that, and depending on the potential benefits of the research, then I'm afraid that quite a lot of animal research sometimes does involve, not necessarily animal welfare research, I'm talking about more biomedical research, but that research often does involve the animals being in pain. The other thing, just to mention quickly, because the proposal I reviewed in the last few days involved clipping of fins in fish. And we know from good recent research from Dr. Lynn Snedden, for example, that fish are capable of feeling pain. But not only that, in fact, I looked at her paper yesterday, and for example, we know, I don't know much about fish, I don't know much about sort of pain relief in fish, but I can look at Lynn's paper and see that lidocaine, for example, and aspirin can be used for controlling pain in fish. So it's a matter of keeping up with the literature as well and making sure that if you are using fish or mice or rats or some other animals and they experience pain, and if the procedure is invasive, that you actually manage the pain appropriately.
Thank you so much. And there is a follow-up question that says, even after going through this and getting the ethical approval for a research that has to do with pain in animal, at what point will you say, okay, this is the end point, maybe we just can't go on with this work based on the severity of the pain that the animal is experiencing?
Without knowing the details of the research, I mean, as I said, the main thing is to try to avoid a situation where an animal is experiencing pain. So if there is invasive research going on, whether it's cutting or fin clipping or something, then you should really be managing the pain of the animals. Maybe the others could comment, but I mean, ultimately, you shouldn't really be in a situation where your animals are suffering a lot as a result of the research, even if the potential benefits are fantastic, or, you know, but you should not have animals, be they fish or mice, enduring a lot of pain for the sake of research. That's not really acceptable for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
In most animal ethics approvals, at least in Australia, they're very firm that you have to understand where your endpoints are. And so these kind of topics will often come in around biomedical reviews, and I'm not on the committee that deals with those applications, but there will often be, at least with our university, there's actually a series of standard operating protocols around common procedures with common animal models. And part of that is to provide these recognized humane endpoints. What the point is to not get to that point that an animal actually dies from suffering, that you recognize the progression. Let's say you're studying a disease, the progression of the disease should be well known, the animals should be well enough monitored that actually there's a point where you say, okay, now we know their suffering will be too severe, now they become euthanized, so that their endpoint is humane. So actually providing for those kinds of studies, it is important to have a very clear understanding of what that humane endpoint is in order to avoid severe suffering for those animals.
Yeah, that means in each of this, the proposal, there is the need to put in the endpoint and also measures to make sure that the animal doesn't exceed the level of pain you really target. That's a very good one. And there is a question here, though it's not part of ethical approval, but I would just like to take it so that it doesn't get lost in the chat as the chats keep coming up. The question says, what's your view about the recent reports of Air France alongside 3 other international carriers about putting a stop on transporting non-human primates for research purpose? Won't this affect our medical research? Erika, do you want to say something?
This is the first I've heard of that. I'm not very familiar with primate research. There's no doubt that using animals for research has aided mankind for improving the health of not only animals, but also humans, and discoveries of that have led to many cures for common diseases and injuries. And we do read a lot about how animals have even been bred genetically to be predisposed to issues like Alzheimer's and high blood pressure and things like that, and how it's used to help us. And I know animals are very stoic beings, and you see even in the wild, you see in farms that there's animals who are experiencing pain and surviving. I think, as Kris and Alan said, it's so important for us to ethically not create this pain and try to manage this pain. But from the standpoint of the primate research, I'm really not familiar with exactly how much of that is going on, and what the options are. Can you breed the primates where you're doing the research instead of transporting them, and whether they're shared or there's other methods. I really can't give more detail on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Erika. Thank you for those insightful comments about ethical issues. Now I want us to discuss the use of animals for entertainment. We know that we use animals in videos. There are a lot of films where animals are featured in videos, and we have animals that are kept in zoos. And we also we have some cultures that use animals for fighting. You see cock fighting, ram fighting, and bull fighting. And we should not also forget that we use animals in agricultural research for breeding programs and for medical experiments. So basically, people use animals for different kind of things. Some people use it for amusement. Some people use it for research. And we also have some people that use animals for advertisements. So I want us to check this. The first is that it's using animals for entertainment ethical. Kris.
Oh, I mean, this is actually a really interesting and complex area. There's no right answer because it very much depends on what animal are you using, what is the entertainment, and what is the impact on the animal. We know, for example, if we're talking about wildlife trade, if we include some particular wildlife species in entertainment, like chimpanzees, monkeys, those kinds of things, there's very little justification for using those kinds of animals in entertainment, even if they're in things like movies where their welfare is managed. And the reason is because that gives the audience an incorrect perception of what those animals are like. And we know that using chimpanzees and monkeys in advertisements and movies actually has a flow-on effect to the wildlife trade and a negative impact on those animals in the wild. And it's not just true of those animals, but it's also true of entertainment videos that you see on social media, for example, where people have exotic pets things like slow lorises, parrots. This kind of wild pet trade actually fuels a lot of detrimental effects on wild populations. So there are situations like that, really, where it's very hard to justify the use of those particular species in entertainment. if you're using things like companion animals and they're being trained and treated very well, and the impact on the audience in terms of their perception of those animals is not detrimental, then I think it could probably be justified from a welfare perspective that it's not harmful. But I think those kinds of things, and I don't want to take the floor, I want to hand it over to someone else, but personally I would find entertainment in terms of animal fighting to never really be justifiable, because the impacts on the animals are so large that I would find it hard to really justify any kind of entertainment along that lines that results in animals fighting, animals being injured, and animals dying for the sake of, you know, someone calling that entertainment.
Thank you for that. If I may ask you, do you support keeping animals in zoos? Alan?
Oh, sorry, that one's for me. Sorry.
Yes.
The short answer to that is yes, as long as the standards of welfare are at a high level. And many zoos are highly regulated with good standards of care for their animals. Yeah, the original question was about cockfighting and something else, ram fighting. And
Yes,
of course, in that case,
yeah.
And for me personally, I am totally against the use of animals in those situations because of horrendous welfare concerns. They suffer from pain directly, being injured. Also, just a personal anecdote. I mean, I didn't grow up in a city. I grew up on a dairy farm in Ireland a long time ago. My family kept greyhounds for racing. Those greyhounds were used for live hare coursing. As a child, I was taken to those events where they were seen as entertainment, and it was horrifying. It's still practiced in Ireland, by the way. Now the dogs are muzzled, but when I was a child, I was brought to those events as entertainment. It involved two dogs chasing a hare in a field, often catching it and ripping it apart alive. And the sound of that happening, actually, as I spoke about it, I got chills through my body because I've never forgotten it. And it's a long time since I was a child. So no, I don't support the use of animals in that sort of entertainment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And to Erika, I want to ask this very funny question. Which one do you prefer? Using animals for food and using them for entertainment? You know, don't forget, when you want to use for food, you are going to kill the animals. So which one will you prefer? Entertainment or food?
That's a complicated question. We only have an hour and a half. I would tell you that when we talk about using animals for food, obviously Temple Grandin, her influences me in my decision making, and we're trying very hard. I do a lot of training with employees at slaughter plants around the world, and our comment is we are raising the animals to provide nourishment for us. So we need to give them a good life. We need to provide them with respect and dignity and compassion, and we need to provide them with a death that is as free of pain and fear and suffering as possible. It should be quick, and it should be fear-free and pain-free. And that's what we work very hard to train people on. And when I tell people, I'm on planes often, and I meet people all over the world, and invariably they'll say, you know, thank you for what you're doing. Thank goodness somebody's doing this. Say, thank goodness we're working hard to make this better. And Dr. Grandin will tell you that when we started in the McDonald's system in 1999, when we started auditing slaughter plants, she said it was the most dramatic change possible. It was industry changing for us to start auditing this and taking action if they were not improving their humane handling at slaughter. And we feel very accomplished in moving humane handling at slaughter in a positive direction, in moving farm animal raising in a positive direction. So as far as animals for entertainment, that in our country, in the United States, animal fighting is considered a felony in 39 states, and it's a misdemeanor in 11. Fines and punishment can vary, and there's been very high profile cases. There was a sports celebrity, Michael Vick, who was fighting using fighting dogs, and horrible deaths for the fighting dogs. Even the ones that survived were euthanized in horrible manners. And so that has made the public aware that this exists. And as well, I have a Psychology Today article that talks about the recognition that animal cruelty can involve emotional as well as physical harm. And there's actually been some cases where people were merely beating their animals, and it was considered a felony. Okay. As far as zoos, I think zoos provide a wonderful educational experience for children and adults, and as an animal scientist, I can view good behavior and a good environment in a zoo, and I can also view areas where you see a lot of repeat behaviors and uncomfortable, and you see a tiger pacing back and forth, and you know that animal's probably not in very good comfort and not having a very good environment for life. And so I think it's a hard question. It's a hard question to answer black or white, because there's just so many extremes and so much work that needs to be done, and we're learning every day how to do that better.
Okay, thank you very much. To Alan, we have some cultures that practice some arts. For example, in Southeast Asia, we have they practice cockfighting, and we have some cultures that practice bullfighting. How can we talk to these people to stop these arts? It's part of their culture, and culture is a way of life. And it's like you want to deprive them of what they do. So what kind of, how can you talk to them to change their mind, invariably change part of their culture?
Is that one for me? Sorry.
Yeah, it's for you, Alan.
Oh, okay. I can answer that quickly. First of all, I meant to say something at the start and I forgot, and that is just to thank Shun and Samuel for hosting this event. And it shows fantastic leadership, actually, starting the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. And I think you are doing an amazing job. And in case I forgot it at the end, I guess many years ago, I was probably impatient about these things and wanted change overnight. But now I'm old enough to realize that change takes time. And I mentioned an anecdote a couple of minutes ago where I grew up in Ireland, where dogs were allowed to chase hares and rip them apart. Those events still happen, but the dogs are now muzzled, and the number of people going to those events is far less. So one is to keep hope, and the other is just general education of the population in relation to animal welfare, animal ability to feel pain, and animal sentience in general. And change will come eventually, and just retain hope. And yes, it is part of culture, but when I was growing up, watching dogs tearing hares apart and hares screaming as a result of the pain was considered part of the culture as well. And that's gone, it's changed. And it can take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but I would say just keep plugging at it, change will happen.
Okay, thank you very much. To Kris, to Alan, and to Erika. Do we have any law that prohibits animal fighting in Australia, in Hong Kong, and in the US?
In Australia, actually, all animal fighting is illegal.
Okay, okay. Alan, what of Hong Kong?
Actually, the short answer is I don't know, but I think it is illegal.
Okay. Erika, in the US?
like I said, in 39 states, it's considered a felony, and in 11
I
states, it's
remember.
misdemeanor. So there are laws in place. How well, there's a lot of ethical discussions and articles about how well they are regulated and the penalties. We have a very famous case of animal cruelty that occurred in 2007, I believe it was, regarding a plant called Westland Hallmark in California, and they were doing their best to get cows that were very disabled. We call them downers. They were doing their best to get the downer cows to stand up because they were not allowed to go into the food supply unless they walked on their own because of the mad cow regulations here in US. And they were using forklifts to move live cows. They were doing what's called waterboarding and putting hoses down their nose. This was a dramatic case, and the people involved were put in prison. Okay, so that, I mean, that, but would that have happened had it not been for undercover videos that were released to the public? You know, I mean, it could be occurring in other places. And unless it's made public knowledge or it's identified by the government or by the company, you may not have the same level of regulation. And I can tell you that since the Westland Hallmark has happened, the regulation that's occurring in meat slaughter plants, poultry, pigs, sheep, goats, and cattle is much more strict. Based on this undercover video and another one that occurred later the next year about baby calves.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about this last thing about animal entertainment before I hand over to Dr. Yasseri for another part. What are the alternatives to the use of animals in entertainment? If you don't want us to use animals, then you must give us alternatives. Kris, do you have any suggestion to that?
Do you mean penalties, like as in like?
No. I was asking about the alternatives. If you don't want me to use animals for entertainment, you have to provide me with another thing.
Well, I think it depends again on what entertainment you're using. You know, if we're talking about movies, the use of animals in movies, then there are ways that we can do that humanely with good welfare. If we're talking about animal fighting, there's no humane way to do that. What's an alternative to that? I guess it depends on the motivations for undertaking that kind of behavior. I mean, animal fighting in a lot of countries, in Australia and the US, it's actually quite strongly linked to other criminal behavior. That may not be the case in other countries, such as Southeast Asia. There may very well be local traditions around that, but I've not seen any research on what those motivations are. And I think that is key to changing those behaviors. But certainly we know in Australia where it's illegal to dogfight, but there's still dogfighting rings. In the US, it's illegal to dogfight, but there's still dogfighting rings. And there's also actually legal forms of animal fighting in the US, which is dog to pig fighting. Basically dogs attacking the pigs. But like I said, these are actually strongly linked to other criminal activities like drug trafficking, for example. Yeah, so I think it's not a straightforward issue of entertainment. I think it's an underground kind of activity that's, yeah, I'm not really sure what people get out of it. I'd be very interested to see research around motivations for this kind of behavior.
Dr. Alan, do you want to add to that?
No, I think Kris has pretty much answered that comprehensively, so nothing to add. Okay.
Dr. Oluwaseun, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before I go on to the next topic, in the zoo, there was a day I visited the zoo, and I think this python was provided with a rabbit now. I think rabbit. So the rabbit, but that was the first day I actually witnessed how the snake, grabs and strangles, the rabbit before. So what can you say about this? To me, it's still, somehow I feel for the rabbit. So I know maybe that is the natural meal or the way they eat, but to the rabbit now, Is it not suffering? When we are talking about animal suffering, be careful in the lab, be careful with the way you handle animals. But what happens to the animals in the wild? Who is fighting? We don't really have control over that, do we?
Well, I guess the difference is that animals in the wild have control over the environment that they get put into. Sometimes they're unlucky and they end up with prey. But if they're in like a zoo situation and they get placed in a python's enclosure, it's not much of a fair fight. So it is quite a different situation, I think, really, when we're talking about a wild environment compared to contrived, unnatural environment. And I think live feeding of animals in Australia, I think, is completely illegal for any vertebrate species. You can do it for invertebrates like crickets, but rats and mice and rabbits, they need to be already killed before they're fed to zoo animals.
But I think I've heard it somewhere that there are some animals that don't feed on dead animals. So if
I've heard that too, but I'm not sure which ones. Yeah. I couldn't tell you which ones they are and whether that's true or whether you can. Some of them definitely, when you feed, like pythons, for example, one of the zoos I used to work at, we had pythons, and some of them you definitely need to kind of lure them with the food because they won't eat it out of a plate. They need to think it's alive before they will actually take it, but the animal's not actually alive, which would be a pretty significant welfare issue, really, to be placed in a cage with a python if you're a little rat or rabbit.
So I'll just go on. So when is it okay to euthanize an animal? Erika, please.
Well, again, this subject, I'm going to speak, you're a chicken expert. I'm going to speak from a standpoint of chicks. My very first experience with chicks is Dr. Grandin and I were in China together in 2002, I think it was. And we were at a plant that was hatching broiler chickens. And here's the people sorting the baby chicks. Okay. And they would throw what looked to me like a perfectly normal chick, and they would throw it in the euthanize bin. And I said, stop. What's the problem? And they would show me how the little chick had what they call red hawk. Okay, because the little chick was not strong enough to break out of the shell. And they said, because he's not strong enough at this point, he's not going to be strong enough to move on and grow to be a grown-up chicken. And they already know that. There's chicks that are hatched with incomplete navels, with open navel. There's some that have an eye missing. So there's many reasons that they sort these chicks at that moment rather than having them suffer for the rest of their life. I have also been to the farms where the baby chicks, whether they're geese or turkeys or chickens, and literally nature takes its course. If you have a chick that's not right, say it's walking in circles and peeping and everything, the other chicks will literally euthanize it themselves. They will peck it to death. And so you really don't want that to happen. So there's an ethical advantage and benefit to us sorting and making sure that every chick that goes to the farm is in a situation where it can survive. I'm also a big cat lover, and I have cats in my house. It's unusual to go more than 3 or 4 days without a cat in my house. If one passes away at 17, another one is here within 4 or 5 days. And yet there's been the case where they get old, they're not eating properly, they're starting to suffer, and you can tell your animal doesn't want to be around much longer. You can tell that they're fading fast. And there's a decision at that point that maybe it's better for the animal to euthanize as opposed to let it just die a slow death. And Dr. Grandin will talk a lot about how this happens in the wild. And in the wild, I have a yard full of squirrels, okay? And there might be one squirrel that becomes weak and old and has a bad foot, missing his tail, and the coyote will come and find that squirrel. And that's a quick death. The coyote has the nature to grab the throat and choke it and stop the blood flow. and make that death as quick and painless as possible for that squirrel. It's not, you know, eating the tail and then eating the stomach and leaving the brain for last. I mean, it's making sure that it makes a good kill. So I think euthanizing, sorting dairy calves. All right, when dairy calves are born, there's about 30% that won't make it for a month, and there's about 30% that will make it to the veal stage, anywhere between 100 kilos and 200 kilos. And then there's ones that will make it to full maturity and become steaks and roasts and can make it. But it's important for us to sort that and understand the difference, rather than have a dairy calf with a cleft palate or a dairy calf that's lame and try to raise that up. I mean, it's to our advantage to shorten that life that's not going to be a life free of needless suffering.
Yeah, thank you. Alan, do you want to say something?
Not really. I mean, that was a really comprehensive answer from Erika. I will just mention one thing. In euthanasia, for me, the term is usually associated with lab animals or pets, for example, rather than livestock. But Erika did give some really good examples. I'm not a vet, but from talking to my vet colleagues, it's a big issue in veterinary sciences, over treatment of animals. So sometimes owners are reluctant to euthanize their pets, whether it be a cat or a dog, and they end up suffering needlessly in a way, because they're not going to recover. So when is it okay to euthanize? Well, when the animal is suffering too much and it's not going to recover. That's in the veterinary context, and talking about companion animals like dogs and cats. And it's a very difficult, as again, I reiterate, I'm not a vet, but talking to my colleagues, it's quite a big issue for vets, trying to persuade people that it's the right time, their animal has suffered too much, and humane euthanasia is a good thing to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, can euthanasia fail, and what is the consequence? Can it fail? The process of euthanasia, can it fail, and what is the consequence?
Well, for a euthanasia, it's supposed to be a humane death, which means it's characterized by very quickly moving from a conscious state to an unconscious state where they have no capacity to suffer. That's really what a definite euthanasia is for, that humane death. Euthanasias can go wrong, you know, even lethal injection, it's usually, if it's performed properly, it will go very smoothly. But if a dog is very ill and they can't get the vein properly, maybe the placement's not good, that can actually go quite wrong. Whether the animal is consciously aware of that situation that happens, but it can be very distressing for owners, because the animals become very distressed and may have very extreme vocalizations. And I think for all parties, that's very, you know, very distressing. You know, that's when vets do lethal injection. So the point is to try and have no suffering. It just depends on the situation, I think. And there are other ways for euthanasia, but they're, you know, less palatable. If you are culling an animal, it's not really euthanasia, but if you are shooting an animal, you can again move it very quickly from a conscious state to a quick death. But it's quite a violent death, of course, and less palatable for anyone involved in that kind of, you know, way of putting an animal down. But it happens very commonly on farms and also for wildlife as well. Here in Australia, we have a lot of wildlife that gets hit by a car, and sometimes they're euthanized also by gunshot. You know, if a policeman, a member of the police can come out, they can euthanize it then via, you know, a shot to the head to enable it to go quickly to a loss of consciousness, particularly if that wildlife, it will never be rehabilitated. Maybe it's extremely suffering. Sometimes that's still a very humane option, but.
Oh, wonderful. So does one need to be legally certified before you can euthanize an animal, or can it be done by just anybody? Erika?
Explain again.
Do you have to be certified? Maybe you have gone through a certification course or something before you can carry out that procedure, or Just anybody can do it.
You usually, okay, like depending upon the circumstance, I don't think anybody euthanizes their own pet at home without having a veterinarian involved. So in that case, and then there's a lot of training that takes place. I have a friend, Monique Paris Garcia, who has written, she has created webinars that you can use for pigs on for processing, where you can evaluate the pig and determine when is it the right time to euthanize. And there's a tremendous amount of training that is taking place. And we have on-farm captive bolt, we have CO2 gas, we have for chickens, obviously there's it's very common as they're growing on the farms that we perform cervical dislocation as the fastest method. And yeah, you can do it wrong. You can not be good at it. So it's very important that you're trained to do that. If you're going to do that, you need to be trained and you need to practice and make sure you're doing a good job. And then as well, even if we euthanize in a plant, we usually do that by either captive bolt or electrical, but we want to make sure that it's correct. So in a lot of cases, we do 2 shots just to make sure. And then we also do a verification because it takes some time for the actual body. We've stopped the brain, stopped the pain, but it takes a while for the body to actually die. The heart can continue to beat for up to 7 minutes on a beef animal, let's say, if we shoot it. And the worst case scenario would be is if we shot it and then we weren't effective and that animal was still breathing or still alive or regained consciousness. So we want to make sure we're doing a good job. And yeah, in most cases, we're training people to do that job. That's not something that you try without any training.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will just take 2 questions in the chat box before we move to the next topic. There is a question from Dr. Ilori. He said, is welfare issue only for animals in captivity or domesticated species? Otherwise, what about animals in the park or wild that are being pushed or killed without any concern or feelings for them? Dr. Alan, do you want to say something?
Yes, of course, there can be welfare concerns for wild animals as well. Particularly if the poaching, if they are not given a fast sort of humane death. The other thing, which is a big welfare problem, is snaring. And I understand that snaring is quite a problem throughout the world, where animals can be caught by a snare and remain injured and suffer severe injury, loss of limbs. And so, yeah, there are many cases. I want to keep this answer short, but there are many different situations where wild animals, we have welfare concerns for wild animals as well. Mainly caused by people, humans.
Yeah, thank you. That is wonderful. So, Dr. Duro, can we please just move to the next?
Alan, Kris, and Erika. I think I'm learning so many new things today. And I'm enjoying the program, and I know the participants are also enjoying it. And what I love about this program is that there is no one-way answer. Is to the left and to the right, which I love so much. So let us talk about animal extinction. If you can recollect very well, we have this story of dinosaurs. And I think we watch it in Jurassic Park and some other films. And all of a sudden, we don't have these animals around us again. Actually, I didn't believe in the term extinction until I started working with Nigerian indigenous chickens. And I discovered that for these chickens, we have 3 genotypes. We have the normal feather chickens, we have the naked neck chickens, and the frizzle feather chickens. And all of a sudden, when you want to do research on naked neck and frizzle feather, you don't get to see these animals again. And on the farm, you are going to have like 1,000 normal feather chickens. For you to have 10 naked neck is a whole lot of issue. then I started believing in extinction. So if I may ask the panelists, what can we do to prevent animal extinction? Because we have some animals that have been, that are no more. And I've given an example that I've seen with my little age. Kris?
Sure. What can we do for preventing? I mean, these are just small questions, aren't they? We can solve them over a cup of tea. I mean, this is a huge issue. Loss of biodiversity and wildlife species. In the current age, I know we've had mass extinctions before, but the current age of biodiversity loss that we're experiencing is from humans. It's from human activity.
Yes.
I mean, they estimate around 3/4 of the world's land areas are indescribably changed from human activity. And we just cannot make those changes to the earth without expecting that we will start losing species. And of course, we've lost many species already, and many have moved to states of being endangered or vulnerable. This is a human problem, and we need human solutions. We need to understand how to harness human behavior to create better conservation outcomes. And this is not my field, this is a huge field in and of itself, but it really, I think it's an emerging field, not only for conservation, but also for animal welfare, because we have similar issues. You know, the animals are the ones suffering, but it's the humans that are creating the problems, and the humans are the ones who also need to come up with the solutions. But there's unlikely to be one solution for everywhere. You know, each local region has different challenges around biodiversity. They have different threats that feed into those loss of biodiversity, whether it's wildlife trade, habitat loss, over farming. There are a range of different issues, and each area will be affected by different motivations that feed into those activities. So it's really about understanding the behaviors, who are the main actors that contribute to those problems, what are the behaviors we would like to change, and what are the best strategies for creating some behavioral change in the people with the most impact. I think it's not my field, but I think that's really the field that we need to harness for these kinds of solutions.
Do you want to say something about that?
Who, me?
Alan?
Oh,
Alan?
Erika, do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Well, I support a lot of organizations like World Wildlife Fund and Nature Conservancy. And this is how they send me magazines and they make me aware of the challenges that we face and the work that they do to try to save species and preserve the environment and understanding our ecosystem. And I think it's really important. I mean, it's obviously a tremendously complex issue. And, even from the standpoint of why are the bees dying? Why are we losing so many bees? And you think, well, does that really matter? But I'm telling you, the bees are so important. I mean, there are wine vineyards in Oregon, and they have the grapes over here and they have the field for the bees over here. So the bees will go and pollinate the grapes, so there's so many complex biosystems that we need to understand. And I think the importance is to do the research, to support the organizations that do the research. And obviously, one of the things that's quite refreshing and gives us hope is the fact that a lot of large companies and organizations are moving in the right direction for social responsibility and for improving their sustainability and eliminating some of the causes of these problems. Yeah, I've been drinking out of a lot of paper straws lately instead of plastic straws, and it's just one tiny change, but it can help our environment and our oceans and our species. So yeah, it is a very complex issue, but I think supporting the organizations that work the hardest and understand the most is important.
I can give, Kris and Erika gave really comprehensive answers again, so I can add two things. First of all, I should say, this is really not my area, so anything I say is based on my sort of reading of the current literature. there are two things I would suggest in terms of meat: either stop eating meat or eat less meat. And the other thing is, it's not all down to meat eaters. Start consuming less in terms of whether you're buying fast fashion and endless shoes and t-shirts and stuff in general. So stop eating meat or eat less meat and try to consume less in general.
Thank you very much, Alan. Before I hand over to Dr. Yasseri, I want to take the last part so that I can take a last part and I will conclude the meeting. Our time is fast spent and we have to finish in the next 20 minutes. Let's talk about some management practices in animal husbandry. We have management practices like debeaking, castration, tail docking in pigs. And sometimes we do all these things to reduce loss. For example, we try to debeak to avoid cannibalism and some kind of aggressive pecking. And if I may ask you, all these management practices, are they painful? Are they really painful? And are they ethical? Kris?
Yeah, I feel like Erika will be the expert on this one, but absolutely, these management practices, some of these are put in place for animal welfare reasons. They're not just for easy management of the species, but they're there because if they don't do them, there are also welfare costs. But these management strategies like tail docking, they are physical alterations of the body. They are painful at the time. If you take a tail off, it is painful at the time. The research indicates that you can have chronic pain outcomes. So if we're thinking about lambs, for example, you know, there's some research around lambs with the mulesing, which is where they take the skin off the back of the legs to prevent fly strike, which is of course a serious disease in lambs, a big problem in Australia. But lambs that do have painful interventions at a very young age do have chronic effects. At least a few months later, they still have chronic changes to behaviour, and actually even longer term effects where lambs that undergo very painful procedures at a very young age, they will actually see greater pain behaviour for them 2 years later when they're giving birth to their own lambs. So these are not insignificant changes. They're not insignificant alterations to the body. They are painful. Where they are necessary, I think we should see them as a stepping point to other alternative strategies for management.
Okay, Alan, can we look at it in this way? Let's talk about castration. I have this belief that when you castrate an animal, you have deprived that animal of its reproductive behavior. So what do you want to say about this, Alan?
I would say I have direct experience of watching young dairy cattle bulls being castrated with no pain relief whatsoever when I was a child. I saw it being done on the farm where I grew up. And when I look back on it now, it's just horrific. So I think if procedures like that must be done, they must be done by a trained professional like a vet, and preferably with appropriate pain control. In terms of just a quick comment about debeaking, I've never done that. I haven't seen it happening, but think about the sort of production conditions in the first place that lead to chickens pecking each other. So we have to look at the sort of, take a step back and look at the conditions in which chickens are living, in which they might be pecking one another, and changing those so that debeaking is not an outcome that should be needed. And the animals that I'm really familiar with, for example, like goats, disbudding is done on goats. I've seen research published. So disbudding is when the horn buds are burned off, either with a chemical or with a hot plate or something like that, when young goats are really young, to prevent them from growing horns. And again, they really suffer. And they require pain relief during it and afterwards, depending on the number of weeks that they are likely to suffer. So again, if those things are going to be done, then pain relief. The one thing I would say is sometimes people are reluctant to do that. One, because they don't really accept that the animals are suffering or feel pain, but two, there's an additional cost, both in terms of money and time. So there's often a reluctance to do it.
If I may ask you, what is your belief about castration and debeaking?
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about castration, and I put in the chat Degree to Act and Carnitech magazine, because I write a blog. It's written in Spanish and Portuguese, but you can translate. And if you want a copy of the English version, I'm happy to provide. And my friend Monique Paris Garcia, again, has been doing research on castration of baby pigs. I did this myself when I was in university. I was told they're newborn, they can't feel a thing. Okay, you tell that to the baby pig, okay, because we now know that the baby pig feels quite a bit and suffers for a few days after the castration takes place, as does the calf. And so this Degree to Act is a thermographic camera that can be added to your phone. And when you hold it up to your pigs, they've actually created the formulas to hold this up to your pig, and you can see if your pig is injured or has fever. You can see the heat and understand where the animal may be feeling pain. And they combine that with the use of a flunuxin, a transdermal flunuxin, which is called Banamine. And what they were doing was literally, they just sprinkle a couple drops on the rear end of the baby pig 24 hours before castration. And then 24 hours later, they conduct the castration. And this anesthesia, I think it's an analgesic. I think it's an analgesic rather than anesthesia. It's an analgesic which reduces the pain during the time of the castration. And as Alan said, people don't want to spend the money, and they don't want to do a lot of extra. They don't want to create a lot of extra steps to try to manage the pain. But here's an opportunity where you can just drip some Banamine or flunuxin on the animal 24 hours before castration, and it greatly reduces the cortisol and the stress within the animal during the castration, and then immediately for the 24 hours after. And so Dr. Garcia is doing that research, and they've had excellent results with it. As far as the debeaking, again, ideally, I will tell you that I've worked for organizations like Animal Welfare Approved and Certified Humane, and they have much stricter guidelines. Tail docking and debeaking cannot occur, and they're raising the animals in pastures and in less confined environments. And this provides for, as Alan said, a situation where those procedures are not necessary. There's no tail docking in pigs in those procedures either. And what's important is to understand that we need to create higher production and yet reduce the animal suffering during and as a result of the higher production. And so it really is a fine balance and a challenge to try to come up with the ideal procedures so that we're not having problems with fly strike in sheep or tail biting in pigs and things like that. So I mean, it's a complexity. Being a farmer and a producer is not a simple task.
That is wonderful. It's been an interesting time since we started, and I want to appreciate the panelists, and we still have just one more topic to discuss before we end the program. And this is about animal cruelty. Animal cruelty. At what point will you say this can be described, or this is categorized as animal cruelty? Because we've talked about debeaking, we've talked about castration. So Kris, at what point can you say what is happening is animal cruelty?
I mean, animal cruelty is a bit of a continuum, really, where you can have animal cruelty that's like at the neglect, where the animal is just not being given what it needs to have good welfare. And it can also be at the extreme end where you're actually inflicting significant amounts of physical or mental suffering on an animal. And I think the strategies to deal with those, that continuum can actually be quite different. If you have a situation where, say, you have a domestic violence situation where there's a perpetrator in a household and they're inflicting violence deliberately on an animal, that's a very significant concern that must be taken very seriously and probably should have punitive, penalties attached to it. If you're going to a community and there's just a real lack of awareness about what animals need, then you might very well take a different non-punitive strategy, which is more about working with the community to create behavior change. But both of those are actually forms of animal cruelty, but they come from different causes and they require different approaches, I think.
Alan, what do you think could be the causes for this, for somebody to show cruelty to animals? What could be the reason?
I'll give a broad answer. I'm not trying to avoid the question, but it's more a framework for understanding. And I think we can use the 5 freedoms and the 5 domains, actually. So the 5 freedoms, of course, came about many years ago, but the 5 freedoms focusing on food and water and having adequate shelter. One of the criticisms of the 5 freedoms was the focus on the absence of sort of negatives rather than animals experiencing a positive life. So that's why the 5 domains have come into existence in the last sort of 15 to 20 years, about not just focusing on the absence of negatives, but giving animals positive animal welfare and a life worth living. So, it depends on where you are on that spectrum of what counts as neglect and cruelty. And the reason I mentioned that is in relation to Hong Kong, just mentioning quickly, Hong Kong has existing animal welfare laws, but is drafting new ones. And it's drafting new ones at the moment based on the 5 domains and positive animal welfare, and trying to put the phrase "a duty of care" into law, so that people will have a duty of care to provide animals with a life worth living. So that's a sort of roundabout answer. There's no simple answer to the question, I guess, but we can use the 5 domains and the 5 freedoms framework for trying to determine what exactly is cruelty and how we should deal with it.
Thank you so much. And what is the most common type of animal cruelty? Erika? What do you think?
I don't think there's a most common type. And I will tell you that as Kris mentioned, children who abuse animals usually grow up to be criminals and abuse people as well. And it can be their own internal suffering that causes them to want to see suffering in someone else. And so I think counseling, not just prison time or penalties, but counseling and oversight after abuses occur can be very important. And depending upon who you are, I mean, there's a lot of people that are vegetarians and vegans who believe that eating any animal is animal cruelty. I have 2 cats at this moment. I used to have 1 cat. I was never sure if I wasn't creating animal cruelty when I went away for a week, because my cat was home by himself and didn't have a buddy, and the neighbor kid watched him a couple times a day, fed him. I mean, it's a personal perception, but there are things that, if you're actively beating an animal, torturing an animal, making an animal suffer, creating a tremendously high level of fear in that animal, I think we can all agree that that is cruel and needs to be prevented. And again, like I said, in production, there are thousands and thousands of different opinions as far as how cruel we are when we're conducting our production of animals. There's a lot of opinions on that. It would be very difficult to quantify what's truly awful and what's not.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And
yeah, I was going to make a quick comment. I completely agree with Kris and Erika. Most cruel, the reason I want to mention it is it depends on how you measure it, of course, what's the most common. But if I had to pick one thing, given that it's been in the news for the past couple of days, think of the number of chickens that are farmed in production across the planet. There are over 30 billion chickens produced on the planet each year. So most common, well, I don't think there's any other animal, is there, on the planet where, I mean vertebrate animal, where we have more than 30 billion of them. Many people would say that the conditions for chicken production are not particularly good. So that might be one. It's a bit sort of flippant and simplistic, and you can measure most common cruelty in many different ways. But the numbers of chickens produced, the sheer numbers of them, over 30 billion, it's just mind-boggling. So I just wanted, yeah.
I think fish might actually be higher.
Oh, sorry. Yes, good point. Kris is absolutely right. Okay, I'll go with terrestrial animals. Yes, the numbers of fish are vast. Fish are far, far, far more. Thank you, Kris.
So what I just got from your submission, Alan, is that does it depend on the number of animals that are being farmed per year that relates to the level of cruelty, or how they experience cruelty? Is that what you're trying to mean?
No, I mean, all I'm saying is it depends on how you measure it. And there are various forms of cruelty in various degrees, but I'm talking about terrestrial livestock. I will say the numbers of chickens exceed everything else, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. And when we measure impact, number of animals affected is one of our measures, absolutely. And I do think that when we have animal production systems, the more animals you have, the less they're seen as individuals, and the more likely they probably are to experience forms of cruelty.
Wow. So if I discover that somebody is inflicting pain on his or animal or pet, who do I report to?
In Australia, you would report to the RSPCA. In Australia, and I think in other countries, it's quite a strange situation, really, where we have the animal welfare framework, legal framework is developed by the Australian states, but it's prosecuted by a charity. It's the only really crime that's not handled by, the government. And it's actually a charity that's taking people to court over cruelty, and they handle all the cruelty cases. So in Australia, that's who you would report to, the RSPCA. I think different countries are different. I mean, in New Zealand, companion animals would be their form of RSPCA, SPCA, but if it's livestock, then you would report it to a government department.
Wow. In the UK, I think I just read recently that there is an upgrade in maybe the number of months or years that one can be penalized or be imprisoned, from 6 months to like 5 years now. Do you have something like such a law in Hong Kong, Alan?
Yes, there is.
Remains and things like
but in Hong Kong, it's prosecuted by the police. The SPCA, which would be the sister organization, is not involved in prosecution, although the staff and the vets are often called as expert witnesses. And if animals are removed from a person due to a cruelty case, it's usually the SPCA that take them. We work quite closely with the SPCA in Hong Kong, but it's the police that do the prosecutions.
Okay, thank you. And Erika, do you have?
There are a variety of organizations. You can contact people in your county, in your state, and they're also in Canada. I mean, there's many organizations, and as well the NGOs or charity organizations are involved in very high level cases. But sometimes the challenge is figuring out exactly who you want to tell and how bad it is. There are investigators at most levels that will get involved, and the same thing that happens, like in a meat plant, we have our United States Department of Agriculture, and those people would report, but then there are other organizations that will investigate. I mean, there's lots of organizations that will investigate.
Wow. It's been an interesting time. I've really learned a lot. I never knew it would go, this far. And I want to believe the participants to have learned a lot. Some of them already putting it in the chat box, their experience today of what they have learned. So at this time, I would like all the participants, please, you can put on your video. And if you have any other comment that you think it's related to this topic or something else, please indicate by raising your hand and you'll be unmuted. So the participants are free to put on their videos. And if you have any comments for any of the panelists, please indicate by raising up your hand. And just one announcement, in 2 weeks' time, that is on the 20th of July, we'll be having our webinar. And this will be given by Dr. Rachel Miller Harrison from the University of Cambridge. Yes, she'll be speaking on many birds, a multi-site open science collaborative approach to avian cognition and behavior. And if today is your first time of joining us, please feel free to follow us on our LinkedIn page, Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. Facebook, we are there at Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. You can also follow us on Twitter at AWGN14. And we also have some of our webinars being uploaded on the YouTube channel. So you check it, Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. So if you have any comments, if we have any participant with any comment, please indicate by raising your hand and you'll be unmuted, please. And so while we are expecting that, maybe I'll just make a general comment. I think personally, I have this belief that these assisted reproductive techniques, where you have things like artificial insemination and things like that. Personally, I feel the animal is being denied the opportunity to express his or her natural behavior. Like for instance, in the rabbit, I think after there's a successful copulation, the buck, falls on its back and make this screams. I want to believe it's an indication of maybe a satisfaction from that. But when you now do things like artificial insemination, is it not compromising, all this natural satisfaction, desire stuff? Kris, I hope I'm not the only one thinking in that way.
Actually, it's a debate for the zoos, actually, because when we talk about zoo population management and whether zoos, how they manage their population so they don't have overpopulation, it certainly is an argument that people put, that they're concerned that the animals are denied their normal reproductive behavior. Of course, in humans, we know that that's a very rewarding part of human life. And so we assume from analogy that animals may feel very much the same way. I don't have any experience in the artificial insemination field, and I know that it's often used in conservation contexts. It's used actually at my university. There's an expert in it for marsupials and who is, focusing on endangered species. Yeah, honestly, I'm really not sure. I'm not sure that reproduction is very pleasurable for all species. My PhD was with wombats in captivity, and it did not seem very fun, to be honest. The girls definitely don't seem to have a very good time of it, and it goes on for weeks, and they experience a lot of aggression towards them, and in the end they have mating. So I'm not quite sure if I was a female wombat, I would probably enjoy just skipping that entire part. But yeah, it's definitely a debate in terms of how much does reproductive behavior lead to a life worth living for animals, and how much should we be enabling that kind of, experience for our animals. And of course, we have to think about this for companion animals as well, because in Australia, we desex a lot of our dogs and cats to prevent unwanted breeding. It's the same issue. Are we depriving them of an important experience? I'm not sure.
Alan, do you have something to say about this?
Nothing further to add. I think Kris covered that really well.
Okay, thank you.
In too much detail.
Erika, do you want to say something about artificial reproductive techniques? And
I think that if you actually, because of the high volume of, let's say, sow production and dairy cow production, and the fact that I mean, if you take, for example, the size of a boar and the size of a young gilt, if they were doing natural reproduction at that point, I think you would find that it was a difficult experience for a smaller, younger female being naturally mated with a very, very large bull or a large boar. I think you would find that would probably qualify as animal cruelty in some cases. Whether we're depriving them of an enjoyable experience, there's an example. This has nothing to do with reproductive, but there's an example of CO2 stunning of pigs versus electrical stunning in a single file chute. And the amount of stress that occurs in CO2 stunning because they move in as a group is so much less that the meat comes out of much higher quality because 90% of the event is less stressful. Okay, so the meat is a much higher quality. But there is still a point of stress with the CO2 because they start to be anesthetized by the CO2 and they know they can't breathe for a moment in time. So there's arguments that, you know, how much stress associated with each process, the stress of going up a single file chute is so much greater for a pig than, and the electrical stunning moment may be more instantaneous, but the stress going up a single file chute is so much greater that these two experiences, the one that I prefer would be the CO2, just from the standpoint that the pigs go as a group and there's less stress. So the same thing applies when you're talking about breeding, you know, breeding a very large male with a very small female, and the fact, and even the stress associated if that male had to perform on as many females as we need him to, I think he would be under stress. We might find that was a stressful experience for him too, you know, because he's really being asked. I think that the volume of production that he's able to impregnate with artificial insemination is so much greater than if he was out in the field trying to get the job done himself.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. We have Sylvia.
Yeah.
Sylvia, please. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. What do you think about including education about animal welfare in the curriculum already in schools? Because I've worked as a vet in small animal medicine, and in my experience, there's a huge discrepancy of the perception of animal welfare in the society in comparison of pets and farm animals. Mostly because people do not really know that farm animals have, in some places different behavior or how they normally behave. And in many cases, I have the feeling that's also a problem of not knowing and not really wanting to know. Because just as Dr. McElligott said, people are consuming too much and they're not really aware of the pain that is just occurring in this process of production. And I think that it would be very good and effective way to educate children in this way, not telling them horror stories, but educate them what is really happening behind the scenes.
Oh, thank you. I think you just added to this discussion that we need to do more about education and trying to have courses on animal welfare in our curriculum, and this will do a lot to educate the people and educate the public about what is really important about animal welfare. Thank you so much for your contribution. So I think I have Saeed, you can unmute, please. You did raise up your hand. Do you still want to start?
Give it thumb up.
yeah. Well, actually, hi everyone. So yeah, I think I just had my thumb up. So, but yeah, I really appreciated that. I think also it is very important and necessary, especially for developing countries, that we need to kind of incorporate educational aspects together with research laboratories. So it's kind of kids need to know and to be educated, at least to be introduced with those activities and in terms of animal welfare. And then we would kind of make a connection between schools and also universities, which I think it is very important, especially in the developing countries.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's a great point from both of you. I think, even in terms of, people's relationship with companion animals and keeping children safe from dog bites, these are really critical parts of education that allow children to bond with animals. And actually, sometimes we find when you look at some of the studies around surveys around vet students, and as people progress their education, actually sometimes their level of animal welfare concern actually decreases. They become a bit desensitized really to animal welfare issues, and probably that's partly just from their exposure, but partly also maybe the way we educate them. So if we can kind of start them young to connect with animals and to be able to read animals a bit better and to maintain a connection with the natural environment, I can only think that that would be, good for their mental health and also good for their safety and provide a lot of nice educational opportunities. I would have loved to have done that as a primary school student.
We have something here. We have something here in the United States called Ag in the Classroom. And the Farm Bureau actually sends farmers into the classroom to teach about their production activities. It can be crops and it can be fruits and vegetables as well as animals. But they send them into the classroom. And something else that we do here is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I participate in a STEM like open. It's like an open night where the students come, high school students come and learn about my profession and other professions related to science, technology, engineering, and math. And so there are a lot of opportunities where we as industry people can help to teach children and young adults about the importance of understanding animals. I have 3 little kids that come to my house. They all want to play with my 2 cats. The little girl is brilliant. She can move slow, and the 2 little boys are like bulls in a china shop. And I have a really hard time getting them. They want to be friends with my cat, and my cats are scared to death of them. So we need to start young in training our children how to recognize, the proper ways to be with animals.
Everybody, I would love to thank the panelists, Dr. Alan McElligott, Kris Descovich, and Erika. You did wonderfully well, and I learned a lot of things, and I've written so many things down. You have also given me some research ideas, and I would also love to thank all the participants. I know we have taken your time, but it's worth it, and I know we all enjoyed it. And I would love people to join us on Facebook and LinkedIn. Our Facebook and LinkedIn is Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. We are also on Twitter, and our Twitter handle is at AWGN14. AWGN in capital letter and 14 in number. Then you can also watch all our videos, our webinars, and so many other things on our YouTube channel. So I would love to thank everybody. I'm so happy today. Alan, I'm so happy talking with you for the first time. I used to see all your tweets on Twitter. Then Kris, so thank you so much. I know I've sent like 2 or 3 manuscripts to you this year for English editing. I really appreciate that. Thank you for taking your time to do all those things that you do. And to Erika, you and Temple Garden, you are so amazing. And I love you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. And to the participants, thank you so much. And to my colleague in Germany, the mother hen, thank you so much. And for putting up all this together so that people can learn. And I know that people are really learning new things about animal welfare and behavior. So we are going to be ending the meeting now. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you a lot.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much. It's been really nice.
Thank you.